Alison Cubbellotti is my guest, and she has quite a story to tell about being the recipient of a liver that saved your life. So I want to start with your inspirational story of when you were first diagnosed at 9 years old with something called PSC. And what is that?
Right, so PSC is primary sclerosing cholangitis, which means that the bile ducts basically harden and scar, which eventually causes liver failure. So I was told when I was 9 that probably within 10 years I would need a liver transplant, but when you're 9 years old, you're thinking about going to friends' houses and brownie meetings and things like that, that it didn't necessarily affect me so much. And then,
How did they find that? Were you symptomatic?
So I was actually in the middle of the night, I would start vomiting, and it was around like 3 o'clock in the morning that it was just all of a sudden, it wasn't attributed to anything. I thought maybe it was from eating junk food but it just wasn't attributed to anything. So my mom decided to bring me to get blood work done, and they saw that my liver enzymes were elevated, which wasn't really associated with vomiting, but they said, well, she's 9 years old, let's wait a little while, retest them, and if they're still elevated, then we need to send her for a liver biopsy. So a couple months later, they were still elevated. I went for a liver biopsy, and it showed that I had PSC. They know that with PSC, a lot of people have either Crohn's disease or ulcerative colitis, so they tested me for that, and I have Crohn's disease as well.
So the march starts with this disease through 12, 13, going into high school. What starts to happen to you with this disease?
So the PSC was kind of quiet for a long time. It was the Crohn's that was giving me more issues of stomach pain and things that would cause me to miss school because I just didn't feel well. And it wasn't until high school that I started having more symptoms of liver failure that no one really thought went with that. During one of my high school dances, actually, I was really sick and ended up going to the hospital that night. I tried to fight through it, but I just didn't feel right. And they found that I was developing fluid around my lungs, which with liver failure, that does happen. So I was at a hospital down here, and they actually shipped me up to Hartford because they weren't sure how to handle that. They had never seen something like that before. And when I went to Hartford, they had to drain the fluid out, and it was pretty painful and stuff. And they figured out that that was like the start of the liver failure, and from then on out, it only got harder from there.
As a teenager, when you hear the words liver failure, did you know at the time that this either means that you're going to die or you're going to need a transplant? When did that resonate with you, that life was not good?
I had to withdraw from classes during my sophomore year, so around then I probably thought, okay, we're starting to have a problem here, but I never thought that I was going to die. That thought just never crossed my mind. I don't want to die, so I'm just not going to. We're going to find something to fix this, and it's going to be better. Like, my mindset was never scared. I wasn't afraid. I mean, I think my support system, my parents, they never let me feel sad and never let me get down on myself. So I just stayed positive through the whole thing. It was hard, but I did.
As things start to deteriorate, what starts to happen?
So
your sophomore year, you had to spend some time out of high school.
My sophomore year of college.
This was at Sacred Heart University, we should say.
Right.
So what starts to happen then?
So the first semester, I really started my nursing classes. So
did you always want to be a nurse?
I always did, yep.
Okay.
Yeah, so it just seemed fitting that all these things were happening, and I was going to be able to eventually learn a lot while I was in the hospital, so that was pretty cool. But during the start of my first semester of sophomore year, I started realizing that I couldn't focus a whole lot and I couldn't remember things. So they tested my ammonia levels in my body, and they were really high. So when that happens during liver failure, you just can't really remember a whole lot, and your brain gets kind of foggy. So they suggested that I withdraw from classes. And at that point, I was actually listed for a liver on the national waiting list.
And you're thinking, what? Now I need somebody to help me.
Right. I wasn't totally scared at that point because I knew that there were going to be people that were getting tested, my dad, my mom, whoever came up, we would find a donor. That just made sense. I mean, right? So during that time period, I was told that I wasn't going to be able to have a deceased donor, which you would actually want over a live donor, so that somebody that you love or care about doesn't have to go through a huge surgery like that. With PSC and other liver diseases, you're given a score based upon how sick you are with things in your blood work. It's called a MELD score, model end-stage liver disease. With PSC, it doesn't correlate to that scoring very well. So even as sick as I was, my score is only at a 13. Whereas people that are really, really sick, they're at 40s, 50s, things like that. And those are the people at the top of the waiting list. I was probably, close to the bottom. So I was told that I would need a live donor. So my dad, of course, was like, well, I'm going to get tested. And it turned out that he wasn't able to be a donor.
Not a match.
Not a match. So then my mom got tested, and she wasn't a match. So we were kind of like, okay, this is a little bit weird. So my sister decided that she was going to get tested because my brother was in school at the time. So my brother and sister are twins, actually. So she had graduated. He was moving on to grad school. So she said, well, he's in school. I'm going to get tested. She got tested and didn't pass the testing. So we were like, why does this keep happening? This is really strange. These people are healthy. They're related to me. That's not right.
Happens all the time, you find out, right?
Yeah. So what was weird about my family was that their livers were not broken up correctly. The liver's in 2 lobes. It's supposed to be divided 60% and 40%. Theirs was either 70-30 or 80-20, which is fine for them to live like that. But if you were to donate that small amount that they would be left with or donate, neither of us would be able to sustain ourselves while the liver actually regenerates and grows back.
So you find out nobody's a match in your family. Now what happens?
Well, so my brother ended up getting tested because my sister wasn't able to be a donor. And this was in April of 2009. And they said, oh, he can be a donor. We think he's a match for you. So the surgery was set. And I went into the waiting room where I hadn't slept the whole night before because I was so nervous.
Now, what are you thinking about? Your brother's going to give you part of his liver. What's happening in your head?
I felt a little bit guilty, but I also was excited that I was going to be able to feel better. I just felt bad that my brother was going to have to go through this surgery and go through all that hurt for me. I just felt like that was such a big thing for him to go through, and I just felt guilty about it. So they ended up taking him into surgery and cut him open. They took out his gallbladder, and they did a final test to make sure that everything ran the right way, and it ended up that it didn't. So if they had taken a portion of his liver, they would have severed a main artery, and he would have bled out. So I'm very thankful that they found that. They could only find that when they were actually like inside. So they had to terminate the surgery. They closed him up, and the surgery was terminated. The doctor came out, and I was like fast asleep because I was so anxious the night before that I didn't really sleep. And he just said he's not a match anymore. He can't be the donor, but he's okay. But we have to terminate the surgery.
Now, is there devastation in the family? What happens?
Yeah. So my parents immediately were like, their roles, they just jumped to my brother because I was okay for that moment, and he was the one that had to recover. I actually couldn't see him that night because he would have been really confused coming out of anesthesia and everything, and seeing me standing there thinking, wait a minute, I just donated a portion of my liver to her. She should be in the ICU. Why is she standing here? So I wasn't able to see him. I was actually sent home and spent the night sort of by myself, which was not the best thing for me.
Here you thought you were going to have a life-saving liver transplant operation, and it didn't happen.
Right. So my parents went to his side, and it was hard for me not being able to be with him because he just went through this whole thing for me, and it didn't work out. So, and I can't do anything for him. My parents ended up telling me after the fact that when they told him, he was devastated, and he just started to cry. He was like, I just wanted to get my little sister back. Because in my family, I'm like the comic relief, and I'm so happy and cheerful, and I make everybody laugh all the time.
Even though you're sick.
Right. Even though I was sick, I still wanted to make everyone smile all the time. And I wasn't able to do that anymore because I wasn't feeling well. And his line to me was, I just wanted to have you back.
Now your family starts to scramble?
Yep.
And what do they do?
So my cousin got tested, one of my friends got tested, my neighbor got tested. Anybody that we could think of was getting tested. People were getting eliminated over the phone based on past medical history and different things. And then we got to a point where we ran out of people. And everybody we knew that was eligible and the same blood type as me had gotten tested or eliminated. And
Is there defeat now in the family?
a little bit.
And how about you?
I was getting progressively worse as this was happening, and each person that was getting tested, they would, say to me, okay, I'm going to be the match. I'm going to be the one that's going to do this for you. And I would get my hopes up and get really excited, and then it wouldn't work out. And I was like, okay, well, here we go again, back at square one. And it felt like a roller coaster ride where it's just your stomach kind of just goes up into your throat, and I asked my mom to actually stop telling me when people were getting tested because I just couldn't handle it anymore, and it wasn't healthy for me to keep going through the emotions like that. Mm-hmm. So at that point, I had just deteriorated a lot. I was in my bed all the time. I was in constant pain. I was having nosebleeds. My belly was really big from ascites, which is something that happens in liver disease. It's just all fluid that's in there. I had problems breathing because I had fluid around my lungs. I was on oxygen at home, sleeping upright. The doctors basically would just give me pain medication because there wasn't a whole lot they could do for me.
How did you have hope through all this? Or were you losing it?
I was losing it. My mom tried to keep my spirits up. I thank her for that because if it wasn't for her, I don't know where I'd really be. She was being a mom. She was being a mom. She would think that if she could just get me to come downstairs and eat a bologna sandwich, that I would be better. And I'm like, Mom, I really don't feel good. Like, I was nauseous and throwing up and stuff, and I just anything that you could imagine going wrong was like wrong with me at that point.
She springs into action at Sacred Heart and does what to find a donor?
So she writes out this long letter basically saying, my daughter needs help and there's nothing I can do to help her anymore. We've gone through all these people and nobody's a match for her. Please, someone help her. And it was sent out to my friends and family and forwarded to everybody they knew, and then it was sent around Sacred Heart from the president at the time, sent it around the school. I didn't know that this was happening because I was just, so sick and sleeping all the time. And I was told at one point that there was this 21-year-old male from Sacred Heart that was getting tested to be a donor. And I was like, okay, well, hopefully it works out. At that point, I was kind of defeated and expecting nobody to work out. So, this was about October that this was happening. And, he went in for testing, and they said to me, he doesn't know you and you don't know him, but he's going for testing, and we're going to see how it goes. So I was like, okay, we'll see, I guess. So at that point, they told my mom that he was a match. And she said, the first thing out of her mouth was, well, did you talk to his parents? And they said, well, no, not yet. They're like, well, you need to talk to his parents because
Are you running out of time at this point?
Yes.
Okay.
She said, you need to talk to his parents because those are the people that are going to be really making this decision for him. I found out later that he went to get tested without telling them because he thought, well, if I'm not a match, then it's not a big deal. I don't really need to tell them, but if I am, then I'll talk to them about it.
So this selfless person, whose name is John Vales,
Right.
who was at Sacred Heart, steps up
Right.
because of this loving act of kindness, some kind of calling that he felt to
Right.
get tested, didn't know you.
Right.
What happens? You have the surgery and you don't know who he is, correct?
Right. So I was told on October 8th that I had a donor, and October 19th was my surgery. So it happened really, really quickly. My mom had asked my surgeon at that point, how long does she have left? And he said about 2 months. So it was pretty urgent that we had the surgery. And he actually asked the surgeons if he could wait until Thanksgiving break so that he would miss last school. And they said, she really can't wait. It has to be sooner than that. So everything just sprung into action, and I had my transplant, and it was so quick. And I thought, they told me that I could be asleep probably for like 4 days, and I woke up that night and I was like, okay. And I remember just rolling my wrists around, and my dad was like, what are you doing? I said, Dad, it doesn't hurt anymore. And it was just instantaneous that this functioning, amazing liver so quickly could make me feel so much better. It was amazing that the liver that I had was making me feel as sick as I was. It was crazy.
So you started to feel better and better.
Mm-hmm.
John Vales gets into some trouble after he gives you a piece of his liver. What happens to him?
He did. Well, before that, when he was being discharged, he asked to meet me. And so my nurse coordinator and his nurse coordinator come running into my room, just beaming. And I'm like, okay, what's up? Like, I don't know why they're acting like this. And they said, your donor wants to meet you. And I said, okay, cool, like when? And they said, right now. And you know, being a 20-year-old girl at the time, I was like, well, I didn't do my hair, and I don't have my contacts in, where's my makeup? Like, I didn't even write a speech. What am I gonna say to him? So I could see him outside the door right then, like putting on a gown and gloves to come into my room. He was in a wheelchair. And I was like, Mom, I don't know what to say to him. And she's like, I don't really know either, because how do you say thank you? Thank you just doesn't seem like enough to somebody that saved your life. So he comes in the room with his parents, and I almost couldn't even like look him in the face, because I was so emotional and just thankful that I was meeting the person that saved my life. And we just sort of held hands, and everyone cried, and our parents hugged, and that was the start of an amazing relationship that I cherish to this day.
What did he say to you? Let's show his picture. We have some pictures of John Vales and you together. We have two pictures. This was graduation, and he walked with you at Sacred Heart when you graduated. Mm-hmm. And we have another picture of John and you. What did he say to you when he walked in the room?
I don't even remember, because it was almost like an out-of-body experience. It was so surreal that I'm not even, I couldn't even tell you what happened, because I just was in amazement that I was meeting this person, this amazing person that didn't even know me, that was choosing to give up a piece of his body to a stranger to save them.
Now, we should say John is not with you. I urged him to come on, but he wants to be in the background.
He does.
And you kind of are family. You talk to each other every month or so, but he really is a selfless person.
He is. He's very humble. For a long time, I couldn't say his last name. I could only say my donor, John. I couldn't show anyone pictures of him, because he's so humble about it. He doesn't want to be known as the boy that donated his liver. He wants to be known as John. And it's hard for me not to put him up on a pedestal, even though he keeps telling me not to do that. But I just think of him as this amazing person. And I asked him, why did you want to donate to me? Like, what made you do that? You gave yourself to somebody you didn't even know. And he said, well, if this was my little sister and no one could help her, I would want someone to step in, and that's what I did.
And he has a little sister.
He does. She goes to Sacred Heart now, actually. She's going to be a senior.
Where is John now? Is he still in the state of Connecticut?
He's actually back in New York. He has his own apartment now, and he works with his dad's construction company, which he'll eventually take over when his dad retires, and he's doing really, really well.
So you'll keep in touch.
Yes.
So you now have fulfilled a lifelong dream of becoming a nurse.
I have.
And you're helping others, and you're starting to tell some, a chosen few, about what happened to you if it helps them.
Yes.
For instance?
Well, actually, there was a patient in the ICU where I was working as a nurse's aide before I graduated, who actually had a lot of things in common with me. So he had the same liver disease. He actually had his, he was diagnosed a year before I was, and he had his transplant a year before I did. So it was, I felt like we were twins in a sense, because our stories were just so similar. And he was actually going back into liver failure a second time. He was rejecting his organ, I think, and you know, he had gotten really depressed, just like I had before my transplant. You just get to a point where you're like, well, I don't know if this is going to work out, and I might as well just give up. And one of the nurses who was taking care of him said to me, you know, your stories are really similar. You should maybe talk to him. So I stopped in his door at one point, and I said, so I hear we have a lot in common with each other. And I told him my story, and he kind of looked at me like, wow, I don't know if he's ever met someone his age that's gone through the exact same thing as he has. And he wasn't really talking to the nurse, and she was kind of at a loss, because she didn't know how to get through to him to make him feel better. Because as a nurse, you want to make people feel better, and you want to nurture them. So once I told him that, he started talking to me about things that he was going through, and we were joking around about which doctors we liked and which we didn't, and just things like that. And I think I just put him at ease and made him feel a little bit comfortable, and hopefully gave him a little bit of hope that if he does have to go through the transplant again, at least there's someone that he can see that is better. Even though I struggled a lot, I'm better and I'm fulfilling my dreams, and he can too.
And you're a nurse, and I just want to wrap this up by saying, if somebody is on the fence about whether they should do a transplant, what would you tell them, or to be an organ donor? What would you tell them?
There's a lot of stigma that is associated with donation and being an organ donor and putting that little heart on your license. People think that if they are in a compromising situation like a car accident or something, that the doctor's not going to save them knowing that they're an organ donor, because they can save so many lives with their organs, but that's not true. If you are in, God forbid, a car accident and you're just hanging on, the doctors and the nurses are going to do everything in their power to make you better. They don't want to let someone die just to harvest their organs. That's not the point of that. People just need to know that if something tragic does happen, that they can go on and save so many lives. Even if they can't donate their organs because of certain circumstances, they can donate their corneas, tissues, bones, different things that can just make someone's life better. And a lot of people don't realize that you can donate a piece of your liver and still function because it grows back. A lot of people that I've talked to about it have said, wow, I never knew that. So people can donate kidneys to someone and still be alive after that, and they can live with a kidney and they're just fine. Same with the liver. It grows back, just like John. He's doing great. And I just encourage people to donate, and you can change a whole life. John, sometimes when I talk to him, he doesn't understand the magnitude of what he did because he didn't know me when I was sick. But if he had known me and he saw me now, he would really fully appreciate how much he has done, even though he doesn't want the thanks. Any milestone that I reach in my life, I thank him, and he's like, you really need to stop that. I'm like, but I can't help it, because if it wasn't for you, I wouldn't be standing here.
Alison Cubbellotti, you're going to make a great nurse. Anybody at Yale who gets you as a nurse is going to be really lucky.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming on and sharing your story. It's going to help a lot of people.
Thank you.
Thank you.